Well, hello everybody. Today is Sunday, March 29th, and this is the third installment of the topic that I've been talking about, the positive purpose of negative emotions. Now, many of you may have missed the last two, and you can go to my timeline, Libby Adams, and you can go back and catch up on those. But I will catch you up right now. Hi, James. I think I'll wait a minute and catch you up. I'm going to actually paste something in here. I'm going to remember to do it at the beginning. I think I did it. I just put a link there. James, do you mind clicking on that link and see what happens if it's the link to download the ebook? So these three parts have been about downloading an ebook called The Positive Purpose of Negative Emotions. Hi, Gladys. James, you're saying that it was all right, right? Yes. Okay, wonderful. Buenas tardes, Gladys. I'm glad you're here. And so in order to catch up, you can just, like I said, go back to my timeline, look at March 15th, where I was first just talking about the positive purpose of negative emotions and introducing the idea that you could download the book. The next section, which was part 2, I said, what do you do if that flow chart doesn't work that's in the book that you downloaded? So the link is up there to download the book. And those of you who were here last week, this is the Academy book that I teach out of. This is my 28-day class. And so I pulled this material from my 28-day class, which I have never done before, but this is a time to do it because people really need to understand the importance of how to process the negative emotions, right? Whether fear, sadness, anger, whatever it is that's going on. So last week, just to catch you up, there was a flow chart in your ebook on page 12, and I'm looking at it here. In this book, it's page 62. So I'm going to show you this, and I think this will ring a bell for those of you who weren't. And for those of you who didn't see this last week, okay, so look, here's a flow chart, and it says how to bring a non-conscious thought into conscious awareness. And it says negative emotions can only send 2 possible messages. The thought is incorrect, so change it. Or correct action is needed, so take it. So in this flow chart, when you get to the bottom, and just rather than me explain the whole thing, when you get to the bottom here, just watch last week's video, and it says that the negative emotion disappears. So at the end of last week's message, I said, this week, I'm going to go more into not just a flow chart, but what do we do if we get to the end of the flow chart and the negative emotion doesn't disappear? Okay, so like a negative emotion, let's say I'm angry at Joe, right? And so I say, well, I'm angry at Joe, and I go through the flow chart. I say, what would I have to be thinking to be so angry at Joe right now? And then I answer myself. I say, I'd have to be thinking that Joe showed up late, or Joe didn't show up for my Facebook Live, and he said he would. And then I say, is that true? It's like, well, actually, yes, it is true, right? So then what do I need to do? And when you go into that box, you just let it go. And I said, no, I'm not going to let it go. And so what do we do in those instances? Okay. Now, remember when Einstein said, you can't solve the problem with the same level of mind that created the problem? Okay, so the conscious mind, when we're born into this world, and by the way, we're going to have a spiritual perspective today. That's what I was promising. When we're born in this world, we come in, we have a body, right? And we're going to assume that we have a soul, a higher self, some kind of a spiritual aspect of ourselves, right? And we get some equipment. Just like when you get a car, it's got some, what does it have? A brakes and a gear shift and a steering wheel and all that. When we come into a body, we've got 2 pieces of equipment. your conscious mind and your subconscious mind. So what happens is, when we're in our conscious mind, sometimes we may make observations that are incorrect. I'll give you an example. Let's say there's a little girl and she's in kindergarten and it's her school play. Her school play is tomorrow. Her mother's a single mom. She says, "Mommy, can you come to my play tomorrow?" And her mom says, "Oh, I'm sorry, honey, I can't because, I have to work." And the little girl says, "Okay," and she kind of understands. And she goes to school the next day. She's getting ready to come out for the play, and she's behind the curtains in the wings. And you know how optimistic kids are. And so she says, "Maybe my mommy will be there after all." And she pulls back the curtains and she looks out and she makes an observation. In her little 6-year-old mind, she says, "All the mommies are there, but my mommy. My mommy doesn't love me. Oh, I'm no good." And she ends up saying something about the situation that actually isn't true. But what happens is, when we do that, then it creates a little false narrative, a little false part telling a story, And so 30 years later, she's in a relationship and she says to her husband, "You don't love me." And the thing is still playing over and over again. So what I'm talking to you about now is way out of the scope of that exercise that you did, which is on page 12 in your ebook. So now there's a whole other scenario we get into. It's like, well, what do I do if that negative emotion doesn't disappear? I've got a 45-minute video. When you click to download the ebook and you sign, you put your email address and it takes you to another page and it says what to do if the negative emotion doesn't disappear. And you click on that video, and that's like a 3-minute video. And it says what I'm telling you right now, that there are 4 expressions of mind, right? So let me get it over here. Who created here we go, 4 expressions of mind. And this whole 4 expressions of mind, along with the Who Are You page, is explained over the course of 45 minutes in that video. So here's the premise, and I'm going to tie this all together. Wayne Dyer said, and most people know this, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. But how do we actualize and how do we tap into more of the spiritual self and less of the human self, right? So that would take a 45-minute explanation, and I have it, but I'm not going to go over it now. My point today is to let you know that it's available so that you can go in depth and really actually understand this. But I'll briefly summarize these 4 expressions of mind for you. So the first expression of mind is universal mind, what you call God, infinite intelligence, whatever word you use, the universe. Okay, so you understand that. The next level of mind is called the superconscious mind. The superconscious mind is that aspect of yourself that when you die, well, when it leaves your body, you die. So on this video, I want you to pay special attention. It's in the 45-minute masterclass. You'll see a picture of a girl in a hospital bed, and then you see another picture of herself, like her spiritual self, rising out of her body. So that thing we call the superconscious mind, or you call it your higher self, your essence, your soul, that. So when we said that we can't solve the problem, which is this negative emotion we're having, we can't solve the problem with the same level of mind that created the problem. The good news is, look, here's the conscious mind. This little, let me see if I can see what I'm showing you. There it is. So the physical mind has the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. So this little girl creates this narrative in her mind when she's 6 years old, and she says, "My mommy doesn't love me." So that's the mind, the conscious mind. Even though she's 6 years old, the conscious mind created the problem. So the solution is going to be in a higher mind. Okay, so what we're going to do is an exercise, not today, but I'm telling you about it. So what we can do about it is we go to the higher mind to resolve it. And I do a meditation called transformational meditation. It's where you put your 2 hands out, you go into your imagination. So it's a visualization exercise. The part comes out, this little girl, my mommy doesn't love me. And in the other hand, you imagine a picture of your higher power, God, infinite intelligence. And then we facilitate a conversation. This little part finds out the truth and finds out, oh, I am loved, I am lovable, I am love. And then there's a resolution. But that's not the function of this conversation today. Today, I want to make sure you understand why what I just told you makes sense and what the setup is of how we're creating these parts that are this inner conflict, right? What we call parts. Part of me knows that I'm lovable, but on the other hand, I just don't feel lovable, right? That's a whole other thing. And so remember I said at the beginning, we are spiritual beings having a human experience, right? So at the spiritual level, yeah, we know that. But and that's who we are. So if I ask you the question, who are you? Which is also in the masterclass, you had a multiple choice question here. You have you, the self, which is your superconscious mind, or you, the conscious mind, or the little eyes. I call these separated parts, the separated self or the little eyes. And so the answer to the question, who are you? I am my true self. I am my soul. I am my spirit. I am eternal, right? And so we need this eternal aspect of ourselves. We need the power of God, which is the highest level of mind in our four expressions of mind. All right, there we go. I'm going to stop showing that. I just voted against showing that now. So the highest level of mind is God. So the reason that I said today we're going to have a spiritual perspective, it's like if somebody's having fear about the coronavirus and all that, and your conscious mind tries to say, that's okay, I'm washing my hands and I'm doing all of this and the odds are against me having it, blah, blah, blah. And then there's this little part, this little voice, this little separated self is, yeah, but what if I get it, right? So that's the recipe for internal conflict. On the one hand, I really believe it's going to be okay. On the other hand, no, but what if it isn't, right? Today, the spiritual perspective is we need more than just the conscious mind telling ourselves a new narrative, telling ourselves it's going to be okay, telling ourselves, oh, don't be afraid, or telling ourselves that we are lovable. We need to have that connection with God, or whatever word you want to use, because that is the place of true power. That is the place of truth. Okay? So hopefully, let me say this. I don't expect you to really understand what I just told you. But what I do suggest that you do is watch the videos where you'll see everything that I just talked about explained in the long version. Plus, you'll download the book, which 95% of the time, you'll use that flow chart on page 12 and it'll work, okay? So I'm going to take a moment to see what kind of questions we have here. And look, I see Barb and Vanessa, Andrea is there. Hi, Heather, Yanette, okay, let's see. I don't think I can't, oh yeah, okay, Krista, Ivan. Mira, tengo muchos de mis compañeros de México aquí. Stephanie Mozart, great. Okay, so I don't think I see any questions because I may have not given you enough to where you could actually ask, the questions. But if you watch the video, right, that I explained, and you have a question about it, at the end of that 45-minute masterclass, you can sign up. There's a little form that pops up and you can get a free 15-minute session with one of our transformational coaches to get your question answered or talk about what's going on with you or whatever you want to do. But watch the class first, because then you have an understanding of the theory that you need so that it can be put in practice. So happy Sunday to you. Thank you so much for watching. This is probably the last Facebook Live that I'm planning to do for a while, because this was part 3. We got into the spiritual stuff. So for those of you who may have joined late, you can recap part 1 and part 2 are on my timeline. If you just scroll down, you'll see March 15th, You'll see March 22nd, and then today, March 29th, which was part 3. Thanks for coming, everybody. Bye.